Whoa, I changed my hat? Well, hey, you can live large. And speaking of living large, I did something I haven't done in, maybe 15 years. I went out and bought a real Canon lens. So it is the 17 to 55 2.8 IS. Let's go check it out. So your first question may be, why did I go out and buy a Canon lens when I like so many other lenses? Well, it came down to the fact that, in the end, it was the best lens for the job. I had the Tamron 17 to 50 2.8, and optically it's a beautiful lens, but it had backwards focus direction, and the focus was maybe an eighth of the barrel turn, and it was very loose. So manual focus was literally, you could breathe on it, you could knock it out of focus. And I looked at another third-party lens or two, and I saw that while they might focus in the correct direction, they didn't have that much more of a width in the focus range. So at that point I said, well, hey, let's go try the Canon, and I was pleasantly surprised. Now, 10 years ago, I had a bunch of Canon AF glass for my film. Remember film? Still cameras. And I had the whole lot stolen. So I haven't had a real need to reinvest back into Canon glass, especially since I've been really happy with vintage glass, the Canons, and all sorts of other odds and ends lenses that I've put on my camera. So what made me buy this lens? First of all, we know Canon is probably the most expensive lens choice that you're going to have. Well, maybe Zeiss might be more, but within reason, still Canon is pretty up there. And really what it came down to is functionality and performance. I needed a lens that focused in the correct direction, that had a reasonable range of focus movement so that focusing wasn't so incredibly critical that if you basically barely touched or blew on the lens, you knocked it out of focus. And I wanted to try out the new AF functionality. Now on the C100 that I have here, this is pre-dual pixel. It doesn't have that upgrade in it. And what the lens does is it goes all the way into the closest focus and then hunts its way back out, and it sucks. And we're not going to pretend about that. On the C300, which actually does have the dual pixel focus, I pulled off some pretty cool stuff that really surprised me, because basically on a Canon lens, it knows which way and which direction to focus, and it worked, well, really surprisingly very well. I was happily surprised with that. I also threw on, just for comparison, my Tamron 70 to 200 2.8, and this is a lens that never autofocused very well. It tended to hunt and peck and be slow, and well, even on the C300 it wasn't great, but I did manage to get off a few good shots with it panning, and it tracked focus okay. So the dual pixel readout autofocus in the C300 and other Canon C cameras actually works really well. Now, just for comparison, I did put the 17 to 55 onto my 60D, and the focusing speed on it was simply frightening. It was as fast as you could frame a shot, hit the shutter button, bang, lock, focused. You could go pop, 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 and go off on a series of different shots, and it was just there, it locked. It worked amazingly well. So if you want to use this lens for still shooting, it's a phenomenally good fast focuser. On the C300 for video purposes, yes, I could actually manage to get pans out of this when I turned on continuous autofocus, where it went from foreground to far distance and back, and hey, it just worked. So I'm giving a big thumbs up to this Canon 17 to 55 2.8. I really like this lens. It's a very good lens for handheld shooting. However, let's get to that however point. There are certain limitations to this lens, and here's a really specific situation. I'm shooting air-to-air in a helicopter. Hey, who doesn't love shooting in helicopters? And what I found was it would stabilize the shot for 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then when I reached the edge of its stabilization, instead of coming back nice and smooth, it just went zink, zink, very quick, very fast, and actually caused a worse jerk on the motion. Now, ultimately, I should have used some sort of stabilizer rig when I was shooting this, but I didn't have it available. The best that I had was the IS in the lens, and to a large extent, I have usable shots. I've got 5, 6, 7 second usable shots out of this, before the image stabilizer decided to go and reset itself in an instant back to 0. So what Canon really needs to think about and do is improve the firmware on this lens, because actually you can update the firmware in the lens if you didn't know that, and make it so that when it hits the edge, it has a slower and more gradual return back to center for video shooting purposes. So there you go. This is really pretty much a very full and firm endorsement that the Canon 17-55 2.8 IS is really a very great lens. Works really well when you're handheld shooting and you're just looking to hold a steady shot. It smooths out all the little bumps and jerkiness that you would normally get from a shot and makes it very, very acceptable. So the IS in this lens works great. The AF in this lens also works very well with the dual pixel readout.